The bar at Outpost Horizon wasn't the kind of place anyone visited on purpose. It was a metal box welded to another metal box, perched on the edge of a dried crater like it had been abandoned there by a drunk architect. The sign above the door flickered between three languages, all equally unreadable. But the air inside was warm, the drinks were strong, and the music drowned out loneliness. That was enough for Daniel Hale. He sat at his usual corner of the counter, drinking something that tasted like engine coolant pretending to be beer, watching the crowd drift in and out. Miners, traders, lizard-skinned mercs who smelled like ozone. The usual frontier chaos. He was halfway through his drink when someone new walked in, someone who didn't belong here in any universe. She slipped through the crowd like she didn't even touch the floor. Tall, elegant. Long silver-blue hair braided over one shoulder. Skin with a faint glow beneath the surface, like bioluminescent veins dimmed for politeness. And her eyes were impossible to ignore. A deep violet, bright and alert, taking in every detail of the bar with focused curiosity. An alien woman, absolutely stunning, and absolutely out of place. She took a seat 3 stools away from him, studying the drink the bartender placed in front of her like it was a scientific anomaly. When she finally took a sip, surprise flickered across her expression, then soft delight. Daniel caught himself smiling. Tourists didn't come here. This world wasn't charming, it wasn't safe. It wasn't anything except a place humans went when they needed to disappear. So why was she here? He didn't have time to ask himself that, because trouble, in the form of a drunk, heavy-armed miner, beat him to her. A towering Vrexian with 4 wobbling arms stumbled toward her, mandibles clicking in sloppy amusement. "Pretty little off-worlder," he slurred. "Want company tonight?" She stiffened, polite smile. No fear but clear discomfort. The Vrexian leaned closer, one hand reaching out. Daniel's body moved before his brain caught up. He crossed the space smoothly, sliding himself between them with the kind of calm confidence only a man who's broken up too many bar fights could manage. "Hey, friend," he said lightly. "Bad idea bothering someone who clearly doesn't want company. How about I buy your next drink instead? Heard you found a big haul in Shaft 12. Tell me about it." The miner blinked at him, slowly. Very slowly. Then, miraculously, Daniel managed to steer him back to his seat, promising drinks and fake enthusiasm for mining stories. When he returned, the alien woman was watching him with a tilted head, her long, delicate ears angled in what looked like intrigue. Her voice when she spoke was warm and musical. That was remarkably effective. "Bar diplomacy," Daniel said, reclaiming his seat. "Cheaper than medical bills." "Thank you," she said softly. "Not everyone would intervene." "It's a small colony," he replied. "If we don't look out for each other, who will?" She extended her hand. "Lyra." Her touch was cool, graceful, confident. "Daniel," he said. "Local cargo pilot and occasional peacekeeper." She smiled, and the faint glow under her skin brightened. Not much, just enough to make Daniel wonder if it meant something among her species. "What brings someone like you to this crater-sized disappointment of a colony?" he asked. Lyra glanced around the bar slowly, as if absorbing every detail. "Observation," she said. "Experience freedom." "Freedom from what?" She paused just for a heartbeat. Then she smiled again, softer this time. "Complicated things." Daniel didn't push. Everyone on the frontier had complicated things. They talked for the next hour, about flying, about the colony, about the odd assortment of species that drifted through Horizon Outpost. Lyra laughed at his terrible jokes, asked sharp and clever questions, and seemed genuinely fascinated by everything. When last call echoed through the bar, she stood and adjusted the small device clipped to her belt, a piece of tech far too advanced for someone wearing worn travel clothes. "I should find a place to stay," she said. "Are you looking for work?" Daniel asked before he could second-guess himself. "I could use a co-pilot, someone competent, someone who sees the world differently." Lyra's violet eyes studied him, calm, evaluating, a hint of amusement in her smile. "You've known me for 1 hour." "Yeah," Daniel admitted, "but I'm an excellent judge of character." She raised an eyebrow, "And if I said yes?" "Docking Bay 3, he said. "Tomorrow morning." Lyra held out her hand. Lyra was already there when Daniel arrived at Docking Bay 3 the next morning, leaning against the hull of his ship, the Ravenlight, studying its exterior with an intensity that suggested she was evaluating every rivet. Her hair was braided differently today, tighter and swept over her shoulder, revealing the full line of her long, elegant ears. A faint morning glow reflected along her skin, soft and luminous, like the light was choosing her instead of the other way around. "You're early," Daniel said, genuinely surprised. "You offered me a job," Lyra replied simply. "I assumed punctuality mattered." Frontier logic. Fair. Daniel placed his coffee, if the liquid could be dignified with that name, on the crate beside him. "All right, then. Let's see if you can handle a rusted old freighter with more personality disorders than working components." Lyra stepped into the ship with a calm confidence that made Daniel blink. No hesitation, no nerves. Just curiosity and quiet certainty, as if she'd walked onto 100 ships far more sophisticated than this one. Inside, the Raven Light looked exactly like what it was. A barely held-together cargo hauler that survived on duct tape and Daniel's stubbornness. Lyra placed her hand lightly on one of the control panels. Her face softened, and for a moment the faint glow beneath her skin brightened. "Your ship is old," she said, then added almost fondly, "but she has character." Daniel stared. "That's what I always say, everyone else insults her." "Then everyone else lacks imagination," she said. He was beginning to like her, a lot. "All right, co-pilot," Daniel said, sliding into the main chair. "Let's do the pre-flight check. Tell me what each system is showing." Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, posture elegant, movements precise. Her eyes moved over the readouts, quick, careful, impossibly sharp. "That indicator is mislabeled," she said calmly, pointing to one of the consoles. "Your thruster diagnostics are reversed. Also, your stabilizer coil has a harmonic fluctuation of 3%, and your navigation software is modified." Daniel's hand froze over the controls. How do you know all that?" Lyra simply tapped the panel. "The readings are obvious." Not to him they were, not to anyone he'd ever flown with. "Lyra," he said slowly, "where did you learn ship systems like this?" She smiled gently, the kind of smile that answered nothing and everything at the same time. "I've had excellent teachers." He didn't press. People on the frontier had secrets. Hers just felt heavier than most. They lifted off. Lyra watched the landscape roll beneath them, red earth, jagged stone, and distant mining outposts, like someone memorizing a world she'd never been allowed to see before. When they approached the ridge, the winds started shifting violently, buffeting the ship. "This part gets tricky," Daniel said. "The automated systems can't handle the wind shear, all manual." Lyra's eyes brightened. "May I?" Daniel hesitated. She waited. He nodded. Lyra's hands touched the controls with reverence, like the ship was a living thing she could feel beneath her fingertips. The Raven Light responded instantly, smoothing its path through the turbulence as if the wind had suddenly remembered its manners. Daniel blinked. "You're good." Lyra didn't look away from the path ahead. "I learn quickly." No, he knew quick learners. This was something else. This was someone who belonged in a cockpit. When they reached stable air, Daniel leaned back. "All right. You're officially hired." Lyra gave him a small, satisfied nod. "Thank you, this feels right." He wasn't sure what she meant, but the way she said it, soft, sincere, made him believe her. The rest of the flight went smoothly, too smoothly. By the time they landed at the Canther Ridge outpost, Daniel found himself glancing at her more often than he meant to. She moved with a quiet grace. She thought before she spoke. She laughed easily but rarely, like each laugh was precious and carefully chosen. And every time she smiled, that faint glow beneath her skin brightened just a little. After the delivery, during the return flight, they talked again, about small things, simple things, strange things. Lyra was observant in a way that made Daniel feel seen without being exposed. And then, as they approached Horizon Colony, she said something that lodged itself in his chest. "Daniel, when you offered me this job yesterday, you had no reason to trust me. Why did you?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "You didn't look afraid of trouble, you looked capable and honest." "Honest," Lyra repeated, as if tasting the word. "No one has called me that before." "Well," he said softly, "maybe they weren't paying attention." Lyra looked away, but not fast enough to hide the glow rising beneath her skin. He wasn't imagining it. It happened when she felt things. When they landed, and 2 days later, Lyra arrived at Docking Bay 3 exactly on time, with a different braid, a different jacket, and the same steady calm that made her feel both mysterious and strangely comforting. Daniel had been pretending to check inventory, but the truth was he'd been waiting for the sound of her footsteps on the metal walkway. He'd gotten used to her presence much faster than he should have. "This run is a long one," he said when she reached the ship. "Northern settlements, 3 days, no night landings, so we'll have to stay over at Ridgepoint." Lyra scanned the crate manifests quickly, then looked up at him with a small tilt of her head. "Does that bother you?" traveling with someone you barely know for 3 days. Daniel gave a helpless shrug. I have good instincts. Lyra's smile was faint but warm. I'm beginning to think your instincts are better than you believe. The trip started quietly enough. Lyra handled half the pre-flight checklist without being asked, her hands moving with quiet precision. Daniel caught himself watching her too long and forced his eyes back to the console. They took off, the Raven light shaking like it always did, just enough to give a pilot a sense of purpose. Lyra watched the ground fall away with an expression of quiet awe, the glow beneath her skin faint but present. Still enjoying flying, Daniel teased lightly. Lyra's eyes stayed on the horizon, more than I expected, more than I should perhaps. What does that mean? She hesitated. Flying feels free, and I haven't felt free in a long time. There it was again, that subtle edge in her voice, the shadow of something she never quite said. Daniel let it rest. She detailed him in her own time. Hours passed as they crossed the volcanic ridges. Lyra took the controls again during turbulence, handling them with a calm that bordered on instinct. Daniel watched her profile, steady, elegant, focused, thinking she looked more like a trained pilot than a traveler. You really have done this before, he said. Something like it, she answered. Lyra, who taught you all this? She didn't look at him. People who wanted me to be prepared. For what? Another pause, longer this time. Complicated things, she said quietly. Daniel couldn't tell if that was humor or pain. Maybe both. They landed at Ridgepoint without incident and completed the delivery. Daniel handled the paperwork while Lyra spoke with the settlers, asking them questions, listening carefully, absorbing every detail like she was cataloging the world. The way she interacted with people was unusual, polite, intelligent, warm but also precise, almost diplomatic. He didn't comment on it. That night, they sat in the cramped quarters of the outpost guest cabin, 2 bunks, a flickering heater, a table that wobbled more than it stood. Lyra sat on the lower bunk, adjusting the small device on her belt. Daniel had noticed it many times but hadn't asked. Tonight, curiosity won. That thing, he said, nodding at it. It's not standard tech. Lyra looked up slowly. No, it's not. What does it do? Her eyes studied him for a long moment. It keeps me alive. Daniel frowned. That sounds dramatic. It is also true. He waited, patient, not pushing, she noticed. Finally, Lyra exhaled softly. There are people who would like to find me. People with resources, with weapons. That device helps keep them from doing so. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. Lyra, are you in danger? Yes, she said simply. He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand gently. You do not need to worry. I am trained. I can protect myself. That's not what I was going to say. Lyra looked surprised. No. I was going to ask, he said quietly, if they would come for you here. Her expression softened, not sad, but touched. Daniel, if I thought you were in danger because of me, I would have left the moment you offered me this job. And yet you stayed. Lyra's eyes lowered. I stayed because this, her hand brushed the wall of the ship, felt like something I had never been allowed to have, work without expectations, travel without scrutiny, a life not defined by duty. There it was again, that hint of a deeper story, something heavy, something royal, something far above frontier life. Daniel's voice softened. You can tell me when you're ready. Lyra's violet eyes lifted to his, glowing faintly in the low light. And you will listen without fear or judgment. Of course. She held his gaze for a long, quiet moment. Something shifted in her expression, trust, fragile but real. Thank you, she whispered. A soft chime interrupted them, the outpost alert signaling night cycle power down. Lyra stood gracefully. We should rest. Tomorrow will be a long flight. Daniel nodded, though he knew sleep would not come easily. His mind was full of questions he wasn't sure he wanted answers to. As Lyra turned toward her bunk, Daniel spoke again, softly, without thinking. Lyra. She paused, yes. I'm glad you stayed, he said. The next morning, Lyra was up before Daniel. When he stepped out of the tiny washroom, she was already suited in her flight gear, adjusting the small device on her belt with quick, precise motions. Her expression was calm, but there was a subtle tension in how her shoulders sat, something coiled beneath the surface. You didn't sleep much, Daniel said quietly. Lyra gave him a faint, polite smile. I seldom do. He wanted to ask why, but something in her eyes, soft, distant, warned him the answer would be heavy, maybe painful. So he simply nodded and finished getting ready. The flight back to Horizon Colony started smoothly. Too smoothly. Lyra handled the ascent with steady hands, her gaze sweeping the skies with an alertness Daniel had learned not to underestimate. Her glow was faint this morning, almost muted. Not sad, just focused. He kept watching her, feeling something in the air he couldn't name. Halfway across the northern continent, as they crossed low ridges of wind-carved stone, Lyra suddenly stiffened in her seat. "Daniel," she said, "reduce speed." Her tone was quiet, controlled, but there was steel in it. Daniel reacted instantly, pulling back the throttle. "What's wrong?" Lyra didn't answer. She reached for the device on her belt, tapped a sequence so fast Daniel barely saw her fingers move, and the ship's sensor display lit up in ways it had never done before. Raw data surged across the screen: thermal signatures, communications intercepts, military-grade spectral scans. "What, how?" Daniel sputtered. "My ship can't do this." "No," Lyra said softly, "it can't." Her eyes narrowed as she studied the new readouts. "There are 3 vessels ahead. They're broadcasting civilian transponder codes, but the frequency spacing is wrong, the power pattern is wrong, everything is wrong." Daniel swallowed, meaning. "They're pretending," Lyra said quietly, "badly." He stared at her. "How can you see all that from this distance?" Lyra didn't look up. "Because I was trained to." A cold knot formed in Daniel's stomach. "Lyra, who trained you?" She closed her eyes for the briefest moment, as if she regretted everything that brought them here. Then she looked at him, and in her gaze he saw something he hadn't seen before: resigned authority. "Daniel," she said softly, "we cannot turn around. They'll see us alter course. They'll pursue." "Pursue you," he said. Lyra didn't deny it. "They're not here for the cargo," she said. "They're here for me." "And what exactly do they want?" She hesitated just long enough to confirm every fear he hadn't spoken aloud. "My return," she said finally. "Alive if possible, silent if necessary." Daniel's blood went cold. "Lyra, what are you?" "A problem," she said. "For powerful people." "And to me?" he asked before he could stop himself. Lyra looked at him, really looked at him, with those violet eyes that always seemed to see more than she said. "To you," she whispered. "I hope I'm still just your co-pilot." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but alarms blared. The landing pad ahead came into view on the horizon, and the moment he saw it, dread crawled up his spine. 3 ships, sleek, military silhouettes disguised under cheap paint, too perfect, too still. Lyra inhaled sharply. "They found me." "Lyra," Daniel said, gripping the controls. "Tell me what to do." She turned to him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked almost afraid. Not for herself, for him. "Follow my lead," she said, "no matter what happens." The ships on the pad stayed motionless, too motionless. When the Raven light touched down, Daniel barely had time to power off the engines before the settlement doors burst open and armed mercenaries poured out. Dozens of them. Daniel froze. Lyra didn't. She stepped forward with a quiet, devastating calm. A tall Centauri mercenary, their leader, approached with a twisted smile. "Well, well," he said, voice echoing through an amplifier. "Princess Lyra Velnaris. You've been very difficult to locate." Daniel's brain went blank. Princess. Lyra Lyra didn't move, didn't flinch, but something in the air around her changed, hardened, shifted into something regal and dangerous. Her posture straightened. Her eyes darkened, and for the first time her glow was unmistakably bright, like a warning. "You have made a grave mistake," she said quietly. The mercenary laughed. "Is that royal confidence cute? Hand yourself over, and maybe your pilot gets to walk away." Lyra stepped forward. Daniel grabbed her arm. Lyra, don't." "Stay behind me," she murmured. "Please." Then she tapped her belt device. Light shimmered, then solidified into a blade of energy in her hand. Pure, focused light, deadly and beautiful. Daniel stared. "Lyra, what is that?" "My birthright," she said. Before Daniel could process any of it, everything exploded into motion. The mercenaries opened fire. Lyra moved like a streak of light, an impossible blur of precision and fury. Shots ricocheted off the ground as she deflected, dodged, dismantled rifles with quick, controlled strikes. Daniel stayed behind her as she ordered. But when a mercenary broke through the line and charged him, he reacted with pure instinct, swinging a cargo hook and knocking the man back. Lyra saw it, something fierce flickered in her eyes, but then another mercenary fired. The bolt slammed into Daniel's shoulder, the world tilted. Pain exploded across his chest. He stumbled, vision blurring. He heard Lyra scream. Not in fear, in rage. Her glow erupted, brilliant, furious, wild. She moved so fast Daniel woke to a world of white light and silence, the kind of sterile quiet that only existed in high-grade medical bays. The air smelled clean, sharp, almost metallic. Machines hummed softly around him. Something warm pulsed against his shoulder, soothing the fading burn of the injury. A voice drifted in from the left side of the room. He's stabilizing. Regenerative matrix is holding. He'll regain full mobility within 48 hours. Not Lyra's voice, someone clinical. Detached. Daniel blinked, forcing his eyes open fully. The ceiling was too smooth, too advanced, too expensive. Definitely not the medical shed at Broken Ridge. Where the hell? A shadow moved into his field of vision. Not a shadow. Her, Lyra. Except not the Lyra he knew. She wore deep navy ceremonial armor traced with silver filigree, the kind that glittered like starlight on water. Her hair, usually in a practical braid, was arranged in a sweeping crown that framed her long, elegant ears. Her skin glowed brighter than he'd ever seen, not soft this time, but unmistakably royal. She was still breathtaking. But she was not the traveler he'd hired. "Daniel," she whispered softly. Her voice alone nearly undid him. "You're safe. You're on my ship now." Daniel blinked hard. "Your ship." Lyra Lythera gave a small, rueful smile. "The Astrine Sovereign, royal cruiser of the Velnari Ascendancy." Daniel let out a disbelieving breath. "Right, of course, because my life wasn't weird enough already." A laugh escaped her, real warm, fragile. It lasted only a moment before tension returned to her expression. "You were shot protecting me," Lythara said quietly. "I had you extracted immediately. The medical team began repair procedures before we even left orbit." Daniel shifted, hissing slightly as his shoulder protested. "So I didn't die." Her eyes softened. "You almost did." Silence fell between them. Then, more gently than he'd ever seen her move, Lythara sat at the edge of the bed. She kept her hands folded in her lap at first. But then, carefully, as if she wasn't sure she had the right, she reached out and rested her fingers against his uninjured arm. He felt the warmth instantly. "Daniel," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "I owe you the truth." He swallowed. "Yeah, that'd be good." Lythara's eyes lowered, not in shame, but in sorrow. "My real name is Princess Lythara Velaris, heir to the Velnari throne." Daniel stared. "Princess, actual princess, that wasn't metaphorical." "No," she said softly, "not metaphorical." "And the mercenaries." "My uncle's allies," she said bitterly. "A faction within our High Council. They orchestrated an assassination attempt months ago. I escaped with evidence of their plans, but not before realizing my life would end if I stayed." She paused, looking past him, as if seeing memories she wished she could erase. "I dismissed my guards. I fled to a world so remote no one would think to search for me. I disguised myself as a traveler. I wanted to breathe without protocol, to walk without escorts, to feel human." Daniel exhaled slowly. "And then I walked into that bar." "And then you walked into that bar," she echoed, her voice turning impossibly soft. She looked at him now, truly looked, and for the first time since the battlefield, her expression cracked. Vulnerability slipped through the regal mask she wore. "Daniel, you treated me like a person, not a title, not a political tool. You offered me a job based on nothing but instinct. You let me fly. You trusted me. You gave me 3 months of a life I've never had." She swallowed, struggling to steady her voice. "I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." Daniel's breath caught, a princess, a fugitive, a warrior. And somehow the same woman who laughed at his terrible jokes and glowed when she learned something new. "So what happens now?" he asked quietly. Lythara drew in a long breath. "My advisors want to detain you. They fear what you know. My true identity, our military technology, the conspiracy. Protocol demands your memories be altered or your freedom be restricted." Daniel's chest tightened. "That sounds unpleasant." "It won't happen," Lythara said firmly. "Not while I still have authority." "And what do you want, Lythara?" She looked at him with a kind of hope that made his throat tighten. "I want to give you a choice." "Which is?" he asked. "You may return to Horizon Colony," she said. "Unharmed, unaltered, compensated." Daniel nodded slowly. Or her voice faltered. For the first time since he met her, she looked unsure. "You can stay with me." His breath stilled. "I will be returning to my homeworld," Lythara said softly. "To expose the conspiracy, to reclaim my place. It will be dangerous, it will be political, it will be nothing like the quiet life you chose." Her fingers tightened slightly on his arm. "But I trust you, and I want you with me, not as a subject or a guard, but as my co-pilot, my friend." Daniel stared at her, stunned. "That's not really a simple choice." "No," she whispered. "It is." Silence stretched. Then Daniel exhaled, a quiet laugh escaping him. If I stay, do I get a better ship? Lyra blinked, then she laughed, a real, bright, astonished laugh. Yes, she said, you absolutely get a better ship. Daniel's smile faded into something more serious. Then my answer is yes. Lyra froze, her breath hitched. For a heartbeat, he saw her royal composure shatter completely, replaced by overwhelming relief. Daniel, she whispered. He reached out carefully and covered her hand with his. Wherever you go, he said quietly, I'll follow. Her eyes glowed softly, warmly, emotionally. The princess leaned forward just slightly, her forehead brushing his. It wasn't a kiss, but it felt like the promise of one. A gentle, sacred moment between two people who weren't supposed to meet at all, but somehow did. A soft chime interrupted the moment. Footsteps approached. A voice called from the hall. Your Highness, the council awaits. Lyra closed her eyes briefly, gathering herself. Duty calls, Daniel murmured. Yes, she said, standing. But I will return soon, and when I do, we'll discuss everything, together. She paused at the doorway, looking back at him with a small, private smile. Rest, Daniel Hale. You have no idea how much I prefer you alive. Then she was gone. Daniel lay back, staring at the ceiling. Daniel wasn't sure how long he lay there after Lyra left, listening to the quiet hum of the Royal Medical Bay, watching the soft lights shift along the ceiling like drifting constellations. His shoulder throbbed less with each passing minute, the regenerative tech doing its work, but his mind wouldn't settle. He had just agreed to follow a princess into a political war, into danger, into a future he couldn't predict. And yet he felt strangely calm, certain, like the past 3 months had only been the beginning of something larger, something he'd been unknowingly preparing for. The door slid open softly. This time, the figure who entered was not Lyra. An older Velnari male, tall and imposing, wearing a uniform lined with ceremonial silver. His expression was carved stone, stern, disciplined, and unmistakably irritated. Daniel Hale, he said, hands clasped behind him. I am Commander Varros of the Royal Guard. Daniel pushed himself upright as much as his shoulder allowed. Should I salute or something? No, Varros said flatly. You are not royalty or military, or even remotely qualified for what is happening right now. Well, Daniel said, at least we're starting honestly. Varros did not smile. The princess believes you have value, he said grudgingly. I disagree. Not the first time someone said that. But it is not my decision, Varros continued. She is heir to the throne, her word outweighs mine. She has asked that you be part of her inner circle, therefore I will not oppose it publicly. Wow, Daniel said. Your enthusiasm is overwhelming. Varros stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me carefully, human. Princess Lyra is the heart of our people. Many want her dead, more want to use her. She is surrounded by danger, betrayal, and enemies who wear friendly masks. If you stay beside her, your life will become complicated, political, and short. Daniel met his stare evenly. So I've heard. And yet you agreed. Daniel shrugged with one shoulder. She asked. Varros studied him in silence, searching for fear or doubt. He found neither. You are either very brave, he said at last, or very foolish. Most likely both. A small, reluctant smirk twitched at the corner of Varros's mouth before he buried it. Very well. When the princess returns, she will brief you on the situation. Until then, do not wander. Do not touch anything. And for the love of the stars, do not attempt to operate any royal equipment. He left, the door sliding shut behind him. Daniel let out a slow breath. Great, I'm already popular. Minutes later, the door opened again. This time it was Lyra, but she wasn't tense or regal or composed. She was smiling. A small, soft, vulnerable smile that made her glow brighten just slightly, the way it always did when she walked into a room and relaxed in his presence. The council is difficult, she said, sinking into the chair beside him, but persuadable. You told them I'm staying. I told them, she said, folding her hands in her lap, that I will not proceed without you. Daniel blinked. That seems dramatic. Lyra shook her head gently. It is honest. She looked at him then, really looked like she was memorizing him. The way humans breathe. The way they soften when they trust someone. I meant what I said earlier, she whispered. These past months were the first time in my life I felt seen, not as a symbol, not as a crown, as myself. Daniel swallowed, heartbeat quickening. Lyra, she closed her eyes, smiling faintly at the name he had given her. You may still call me that, I prefer it. Silence settled between them, soft, warm, expectant. Then she stood and offered him her hand. "We will be leaving soon," she said quietly. "The journey to Velnaris Prime will take 3 weeks. The moment we arrive, everything will change." Daniel took her hand, letting her help him sit up straighter. "Good thing I'm adaptable." Her laugh was soft, breathy, genuine. "I am grateful you're here, Daniel Hale. Wouldn't be anywhere else." Lyra hesitated, then sat beside him on the bed, close enough that he could feel the soft warmth radiating from her skin. "There is more you must know," she said. "My uncle's faction has influence, power, ships. They will try to stop us. They will try to silence the truth before it reaches the council. Then we deal with them. It will be dangerous. I know. It may get you killed." Daniel smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the first close call. Lyra's eyes flickered. Fear, affection, something deeper. And she reached up, touching his face lightly with the back of her fingers. "You're not allowed to die," she whispered. "I refuse to let this galaxy take anything more from me." Daniel's breath caught. She didn't kiss him, but she leaned her forehead to his, the faint glow beneath her skin brushing against his in a warm shimmer of light. Her long ears curled softly, a Velnari gesture he recognized now: trust, intimacy, connection. He closed his eyes, letting the moment settle around them. Her voice came as a whisper. "When we return to my world, when the danger is over, there are things I want to say to you, things I cannot say yet." Daniel smiled. "I'll hold you to that." "You'd better," she murmured. The door chimed again, urgent this time. A guard's voice echoed through. "Your Highness, enemy vessels detected on long-range scans. They've found us." Lyra stood instantly, every trace of softness vanishing beneath a wave of sharp, focused authority. "Then it begins," she said quietly. She looked back at Daniel once more, just once, with a gaze that held more promise than words ever could. "Stay close to me," she whispered. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Daniel pushed himself fully upright, ignoring the ache. "Together," he echoed. The doors slid open. Alarms began to sound. The Astrine sovereign